3-4 meters can be a problem for string players, and it's just a mathematics thing. You know, you have 3 beats in the measure, and your bow can go down or up, and so sometimes you end up with an uneven measure. If you have a note in the measure that's a half note or greater, you know, like half quarter or quarter half or half and 2/8 notes, if we don't bow these very carefully, we can really destroy the phrase. And it's good to practice these bowings on open strings so that we can keep our dynamics even. Otherwise, we unintentionally accent notes or swoosh notes or whatever, and it really kills the phrase. I did a teaching companion for Lullaby, and it's available on teachingorchestra.com. And the strategy for bowings that I use, it's basically just that. You know, I have them start with dotted half notes, you know, just give them heavy bows through the measure, and then they do half quarter, and then quarter half to make sure that the up bows aren't accented on beat 3 and the down bows aren't accented on beat 1. Then we do half 2/8, so they learn how to play in different parts of the bow here. And there's some other rhythms like rest half, and then 1/8 rest followed by an 1/8 note, and then 2/3. And that will pretty much get you through most of the rhythms so that your students learn how to play those evenly, and they can create 4-bar phrases instead of just smashing up bows or down bows or wherever the shorter rhythmic value tends to be is the one that the students tend to unintentionally accent. In Lullaby, there are string crossings everywhere, especially in the cello part. And remember, Lullaby was originally written for solo violin and piano. So if you think of like the left hand in the piano, the cello part that's in the string version, it's very idiomatic to the left hand in the piano. On the cello, it's less so, but it's not impossible, and your cellists are really going to have fun playing it, especially if they have the right technique. But they need to learn how to cross strings with a straight bow, or else it's going to be a disaster. Here in the teaching companion, I just have them play with the open strings, and they just cross strings. Now, the first time you do it, you might not have them slur beat 2 and 3. You can do it without slurs, that's fine. But they need to be able to do fluid bows here while keeping the bow straight. String crossing is hard enough with a straight bow. Without a straight bow, it's darn near impossible because you're transferring your weight onto a different string, and if your bow isn't straight, it's probably sliding, and if it's sliding, you can't grip the new string to activate the new string, and it's just gonna sound like trash. The next string crossing technique in the teaching companion, I have everybody crossing strings on all 4 strings. I have them do the quick string cross on beat 1. Now, if this is too quick for them, of course, you can slow it down. You can even change the rhythm. Instead of doing this in 3/4, you could do this in 4/4 and just go note by note and have them string cross individually. Note by note, string cross individually. But the idea is that it mimics these parts in the cello with the right hand, and then they can add the left hand. If they already have the bow technique, it's going to make it a lot easier to play. One of the challenges with string crossing is that when you're crossing to a string on a slur, and a lot of these string crossings are slurred, if you think about like a down bow, for instance, going from a lower string to a higher string, as you bow and you cross strings, you're going to lose a little bit of bow. How much bow? Well, it's the distance between the 2 strings is what you're going to lose. So fortunately, the way this is written, a lot of times the shorter rhythmic value or the shorter tie or whatever is going to be on the down bow, and that's going to help. But students are going to need to figure out how to play a little heavier with their down bows to compensate for the lost bow, and then play a little quicker on the up bows. Unless the up bows happen to cross down to a lower string, if that's the case, and it doesn't happen all that often here, but if it is the case, you're going to lose whatever the width in between your strings are from string to string when you're up bowing and crossing to a lower string. So in that case, you're going to need to have a heavier up bow to compensate for that. Students can also use motion. You know, pressing down against the string is not the only way to handle this. And also when you get into the upper part of the bow, it might be harder because you lose a little bit of leverage when you're in the upper part of the bow. So I like to have my students transfer weight so they can shift their weight so that their center of mass is on the same part of the bow they're playing on. So if they're bowing to the upper part of the bow, they shift their weight this way so that their center of mass is towards the upper half of the bow. And as they bow back, they shift their center of mass back. I think teaching motion to your students is wonderful. You know, it makes playing a lot more kinesthetic. Students love to move around. You know, think about in most of the classes, the students are told to sit down and shut up and, you know, be quiet, to stop fidgeting, all that kind of stuff. And in string playing, we get to move around. So if you need some tips on how to teach motion, go to season 1, episode 6, and I do a whole series on motion and some ideas on how to teach that in your classroom. When you're string crossing and you start adding the left hand, make sure that your students understand how to cross strings with the left hand too. Okay, if the cellos, if their elbows are down and kind of pinned to their side, it's not going to be good. So their elbows need to be out here, and they need to be able to rotate the shoulder to get to all 4 strings. You know, that's not just for cellos. Bass players need to do that too. Violins and violas need to rotate the shoulder this way when they cross strings. And a good way to do that is just practicing elbow swings, get them to loosen up that shoulder. It's an old Suzuki exercise that I use a lot, and it's very effective. If you need more ideas on how to cross strings, you can go to season 1, episode 9, and I go into a lot more detail on string crossing, how to lead with the wrist, how to lead with the elbow. Most of the stuff in Lullaby is going to be leading with the elbow, but if you need some general string crossing tips, that's a good place to go. In the next video, we're going to talk about the left hand. There's a lot of shifting in Lullaby and the first violin part and the cello part and the bass part. Not so much for seconds and violas. I mean, they can shift if they want to, but you know, it's mostly for the 3 instruments that I mentioned. And so I hope to see you in the next video to get some tips on shifting.